Evening chanting, page number 16. Dedication of offerings and preliminary homage. Yo som bhagava arahang samma sambuddho swakhato yena bhagavata dhammo supatipanno yasa bhagavato sāvaka saṅgho Tammayam Bhagavantang Sadhammang Sasangang Ime hi sakare hi yatharaha aropite hi abhipujayama sadhuno bhante bhagava sucira parinibbhutopi Pachima janatanukampa ime sakare dugata panakara bhute patiganhatu amhakang dikharatang hitaya sukhaya Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantang Abhivadin Swakhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅgho Saṅghang Namami Dhammayang Buddhassa Bhagavato Pubbabhaganamakarang Karomase Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Hannamayang buddhanusatena yang karomase Tangho banam bhagavantang evang kalayano kiti sado apugato iti piso bhagava arahang samma sambuddho Charana sampanno sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisa dhammasarati satha deva manusanang buddho bhagavati annamayang buddham vigiting karomase Bendawarahanta diguna biyuto Suna binyana karuna hisamagatato Bodhe siyo sujanatang kamaram vasuro Vandamahang tamaranang sirasa jinendang Buddhoyo Sambhapaninang Saranang Khemamutamang Pathamanusate Thanang Vandamitang Sirenahang Buddha Sahasamidaso Vam Buddho Me Samikisaro Buddho Dunga Saṅghāta Ca Vidhata Ca Hitasame Buddha Sahang Niyademi Sariran Chivitang Chidang Vandanto Hang Charisami Buddha Seva Subodhitang Nati me saranang anyang buddho me saranang varang Sachavajena vadhayang sadhu sasane Buddha me vandamanena yam punyam pasutang ida Sabe piyantaraya me mae sung dasade jasa Kaina vachaya vache dasawa Buddhe kukamam bhagatam mayayang Buddho patiganhato achayantang Kalantare samvaritung va buddhe Antamayang dhammanusate nayang karoma se Swakhato bhagavata dhammo Sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko Opanaiko pachatang veditam ho vinyohite Antamayang dhammam vigiting karoma se Savakhata digunayo gavase nasayo Yo magapaka pariyati vimokha beto Dhammo kulo kapatana tatha dhari dhari Vandamahang tamaharam varadhammametang Dhammo yo sabbapaninang saranang khemamutamang Dutiyânusati thanang vandamitāṃ sirenahang Dhamma sahasamidā sova Dhammo me samikisaro Dhammo dukkha saggata ca vidhata ca hitasame Dhamma sahang niyademi sarirang chivitang chidang Vandanto hang charisami dhamma sudhammatang Nati me saranang anyang dhammo me saranang varang Etena sachavajena vadayang sadhu sasane Dhammam me vandamanena yam punyam pasutang ida Antaraya me mae sung tasade jasa Kaena vachaya vacetasa va Dhamme kukamam bhagatam mayayang Dhammo patiganhato achayantang Kalantare samvaritung va dhamme Antamayang saṅghānusate nayang karoma se Supatipano bhagavato sāvaka saṅgho Uchupatipano bhagavato sāvaka saṅgho Nyāyapatipano bhagavato sāvaka saṅgho Samicipatipano bhagavato sāvaka saṅgho Yadidang chattari purisa yugani atha purisa pugala esa bhagavato savaka sangho ahunayo pahunayo dakinayo anjali karaniyo anuttaram punya khetang lokasate Andhamayang sangham vigiting karomase Sadhamajo supatipati gunabhiyuto Yonabhito Arya Pungala Sanghaseto Sila Dhamma Pavarasaya Kaya Cito Vandamahang Tamariyana Ganang Susudhang Sanghoyo Sambapaninang Saranang Khemamuttamang Tatiyanu Thanang Vandamitam Sirenahang Tham Sahasamida Sova Sangho Me Samikissaro Sangho Dukha Sanghata Chavidhata Chahitasame Sangha sahang niyademi sarirang jivitang chidang Vandanto hang charisami sangha sopatipanatang Nati me saranang anyang sangho me saranang warang Sajavajena vadayang sadhu sasane Sangham me vandamanena yang punyang pasutang idha Sambe piyantaraya me mahesung tassa tejasa Kaena vacaya vacetasa Sanghe gukamam bhagadamayayang Sangho patiganhatu acayantang Kalantare sangvaritung vasanghe. Page number 81, 81. DhammacakkappavattanaSutta Patho. Page 81. Annamayang DhammacakkappavattanaSutta Pathang Manamase Due me bhikkhave anta because there are these two extremes Pambajitena nasevitamba that should not be pursued by one who has gone forth Yo chayang kame sukama sukhalikanu yogo. That is whatever is tied up to sensual play within the realm of sensuality. He know which is low, gamo, common, potu janiko, the way of the common folks, anariyo, not the way of the noble ones, anathasanhito, and pointless, yo chayang atthakila madhanu yogo. Then there is whatever is tied up, will self-deprivation, dukkho, which is painful, anariyo, not the way of the noble ones, anathasanhito, and pointless. Ete te bhikkhave ubho ante anupagama machima patipada tathagatena abhisambuddha because without going to either of these extremes, the Tathagata has ultimately awakened to a middle way of practice, Chakkukarane, giving rise to vision, Jnanakarane, making for insight, Upasamaya, leading to calm, Abhinyaya, to heighten knowing, Sambodhaya, awakening, Nibbanaya samvattate, and to Nibbana, Katama cha sa bhikkhave majjhima patipada, and what bhikkhus is the middle way of practice. Ayameva Aryo Arthangiko Maggo. This is the Noble Eightfold Path. Sayatidam, which is as follows. Sammaditthi, right view. Samma Saṅkappo, right intention. Samma Vaca, right speech. Samma Kammanto, right action. Samma Ajivo, right livelihood. Samma Vayamo, right effort. Samma Sati, right mindfulness. Samma Samadhi, right concentration. Ayang ko sa bhikkhave majjhima patipada tathagatena abhisambuddha. Middle way of practice that the Tathagata has ultimately awakened to, Chakkukarani, giving rise to vision, Jnanakarani, making for insight, Upasamaya, leading to calm, Abhinyaya, to heighten knowing, Sambodhaya, awakening, Nibbanaya samvattate, and to Nibbana, idang ko panabhikkhave dukkhang ariya sachang. This because is the noble truth of dukkha, jati pi dukkha, birth is dukkha, jara pi dukkha, aging is dukkha, Maranam pi dukkhang, and that is dukkha. Soka parideva dukkha domana supaya sapi dukkha. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair are dukkha. Apiyehi sampayogo dukkho. Association with the disliked is dukkha. Piyehi vipayogo dukkho. Separation from the liked is dukkha. Yampi chang nalabhati tampi dukkhang. Not attaining one's wishes is dukkha. Sankitena panchupadana khanda dukkha. In brief, the five focuses of identity are dukkha. Idang ko panabhikkhave dukkha samudayo ariya sachang. This because is the noble truth of the cause of dukkha. Yayang tanha, it is this craving. Pono bhavika, which leads to rebirth. Nandira gasahagata, accompanied by delight and lust. Tatra tatra binandini, delighting to here and now there. Yatidang, namely kama tanha, craving for sensuality. Bhava tanha, craving to become. Vibhava tanha, craving not to become. Idang ko panabhikkhave dukkha nirodho ariya sachang. This because is the noble truth of the sensation of dukkha. Yotassa eva tanhaya asesa viraga nirodho. It is the reminderless fading away and sensation of that very craving. Chago, relinquishment. Patinisago, letting go. Muti, release. Analayo, without any attachment. Idang ko panabhikkhave dukkha nirodhagamini patipada arya satyam. This because is the noble truth of the way of practice, leading to the sensation of dukkha. Ayameva Ariyo Athangiko Maggo. It is just this noble eightfold path. Sayatidam, which is as follows. Samaditi, right view. Samma Saṅkappo, right intention. Samma Vaca, right speech. Samma Kammanto, right action. Samma ajivo, right livelihood. Samma vayamo, right effort. Samma sati, right mindfulness. Samma samadhi, right concentration. Idang dukkhang ariya satyanti me bhikkhave. Pumbe ananusute sudhammesu chakkhung udapadi jnanang udapadi panya udapadi vijja udapadi aloko udapadi. Bhikkhus, in regard to things unheard of before, vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, light arose. This is the noble truth of dukkha. Tangko panidang dukkhang ariya satyam parinyayante. Now this noble truth of dukkha should be completely understood. Tangko panidang dukkhang ariya satyam parinyatante. Now this noble truth of dukkha has been completely understood. Gidang dukkha samudayo ariya satyanti me bhikkhave. Pumbe ananusute sudhammesu chakkhung udapadi jnanang udapadi panya udapadi udapadi aloko udapadi. Because in regard to things unheard of before, vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, light arose. This is the noble truth of the cause of dukkha. Tangko panidang dukkha samudayo ariya satyang pahatabante. Now this cause of dukkha should be abandoned. Tangko panidang dukkha samudayo ariya satyang pahinante. Now this cause of dukkha has been abandoned. Idang dukkha nirodho ariya satyanti me bhikkhave. Pumbe ananusute sudhammesu chakkhung udapadi jnanang udapadi panya udapadi vijja udapadi aloko udapadi. Because in regard to things unheard of before, vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, light arose. This is the noble truth of the sensation of dukkha. Tangko panidang dukkha nirodho ariya satyang satchikatabante. Now the sensation of dukkha should be experienced directly. Tangko panidang dukkha nirodho ariya sachang sachikatanti. Now the sensation of dukkha has been experienced directly. Idang dukkha nirodhagamini patipada ariya sachanti me bhikkhave. Pumbe ananusute sudhammesu Chakhung udapadi, Jnanang udapadi, Panya udapadi, Vijja udapadi, Aloko udapadi. Cause in regard to things unheard of before, vision arose, insight arose, discernment arose, knowledge arose, light arose. This is the noble truth of the way of practice, leading to the cessation of dukkha. Tangko panidang dukkha nirodhagamini patipada ariya sacham bhave tabanti. Now this way of practice leading to the cessation of dukkha should be developed. Tangko panidang dukkha nirodhagamini patipada ariya sacham bhave tanti. Now this way of practice leading to the cessation of dukkha has been developed. Yava kivancha me bhikkhave ime su chatu su ariya sachesu evanti parivattam dvadasakarang yatha bhut jnana dasanang nasu visuddhang ahosi. As long as knowledge and understanding as it actually is of these four noble truths with their phases and dual aspects was not entirely pure. Neva tavaham bhikkhave sadeva ke loke samarake sabrahmake Sasamana Brahmaniya Pajaya Sadeva Manusaya Anuttarang Samma Sambodhing Abhisambuddho Pachanyasing. Did I not claim because in this world of Devas, Maras and Brahma, amongst mankind with its priests and renunciants, kings and commoners, as an ultimate awakening to unsurpassed perfect enlightenment. Yato chakho me bhikkhave ime su chatu su ariya sache su evanti parivattam dvadasakara yatha bhutang jnana dasanang suvisuddhang ahosi. But when bhikkhus my knowledge and understanding as it actually is, of these four noble truths, with their three phases and dual aspects, was indeed entirely pure. Athaham bhikkhave sadeva ke loke samarake sabrahmake sasamana brahmaniya pajaya sadeva manusaya Anuttarang Samma Sambodhing Abhisambud Pachanyasing. Then indeed did I claim because in this world of Devas, Mara and Brahma, amongst mankind with its Nuncian, kings and commoners, and ultimate awakening, as perfect enlightenment, jnanam chapaname dasanang udapadi. Now knowledge and understanding arose in me, akupa me vimuti. My release is unshakable. I am antima jati. This is my last birth. Natidani puna bhavoti. There won't be any further becoming. So we will sit for half an hour until 8. and then Ajahn Kevali will give a talk on the subject of DhammacakkappavattanaSutta. So we'll pay respect and then Ajahn will turn around. So Dr. Dhar will invite Ajahn Kevali to give a Dhamma talk.
ब्रह्माचलोकाधिपति सहम्पति कथंजलि अन्धिवरम् अयाचत संतिद्ध अपरजक्ख जातिका देशे सुधम्मम् अनुकंपिमं पजम्.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami Ito Parang Sakajang Dhammo Sotapoti. Ask permission from the Sangha and extend my greetings, blessings in the Dhamma to all of us, Upasaka, Upasikas, gathered here, and also the people joining in on the transmission over, I think, Zoom. And I'd like to express first that I'm very happy to be able to be here in Arañña Saṅghārāma Bodhvihar in Rampur Genda, Vilashpur, Yamuna Nagar, Haryana, Bharat. And of course, I feel very honored to talk about the Dhamma on this occasion to good friends in the Dhamma, both in the Sangha and the laity. We have been endeavoring for a long time to have these opportunities to come together and practice in this setting of having a forest monastery in India, and be able to be immersed in the culture of ancient India all the way to the present day, together with the feeling around the place being blessed by the Buddha, in that sense that he taught in countless occasions in this area of the world and even in this area of India We do believe that the Lord Buddha passed through wandering here in this area, and we feel very uplifted by that. And so today and tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, I'm intending to talk about the three main discourses that the Buddha gave at the beginning of his teaching. And the first one tonight I'll comment on and give some thoughts to is the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta. The sutta, the discourse about the setting forth in motion the wheel of the Dhamma, the turning of the Dhamma wheel. So this is already something to expound upon, because a wheel keeps turning, and the Dhamma wheel is like sometimes depicted in many Buddhist arts, and many occasions, even before there were Buddha images, we had the Dhamma wheel, the Dhammacakka. And the idea of it being a wheel to me means that it is turning, and there are opportunities to revisit the same topics many times with different angles or in different places, and that it is something in motion. It's not something static. It's not something that we assert once and forever. But for us, especially if we're practicing, it means a constant dynamic approach of seeing what the teachings of the Lord Buddha mean. And in this sense, I'm sharing things from the way I've been practicing or been instructed to practice by my own teachers. And these are also your teachers. For example, Luang Cha, who all of us haven't met, but Luang Sumedo, who most of us have met. And then also present teachers in Thailand, for example, the Most Venerable Luang Por Liam, who has been visiting in February here. So we take these pointers towards the Dhamma as they are picked up from the rolling wheel of the Dhamma from various sources and integrate them, bring them to our heart and to our understanding, possibly repetitively. This is what I believe is implied for us looking at the practice, that we don't just pass this once, but we keep turning, because maybe there are new aspects to it and the wheel keeps rolling to other places. Of course, I believe that the historians and the Buddhologists of this world have got a good explanation why exactly the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta is talking about the wheel of the Dhamma, but this is my interpretation. I apologize if it's just a practical approach. I find it's a great relief to think that the Buddha actually expounds in many ways, many times, the same topics for us to gradually internalize and gradually realize. So if we are still stuck with the very first sermon, I think it's not a fault at all, because it keeps turning in us, because it teaches us continually in various aspects. And it is I would say, regarded as the most important teaching that the Buddha gave. It's also the groundbreaking teaching after the Buddha had realized full awakening. As we know, he was first disinclined to not say much about his realization and the truths that he discovered, thinking that they're so profound, people won't easily gather them, won't easily capture them, won't easily understand them. So the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta, as you know from the life of the Buddha, is the first teaching in which he was, let's say, invited or possibly even persuaded by the Brahma Sahampati to teach, thinking that despite the world being caught up with all kinds of superficial things like sensuality and cravings and the feeling of likes and dislikes, and despite the world lacking profundity, there are people in this world that can actually follow these teachings and capture the meaning and realize the Dhamma. So it's many aspects that can help us in our practice. One of them is the encouragement to see it as yes, it's a profound and deep teaching that we shouldn't just take superficial. And sometimes we may be casual about it and use the phrases from the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta in a superficial way. But if we keep practicing and meditating on these topics, they become very profound in every aspect, in each area that we apply them. And so I fully understand why when one time I asked Lompa Sumedho what is his favorite sutta, he said it's the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta. And as you know, his teachings, he many times refers to the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta and also to the contents of the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta. At that point, I confess I was a little bit disappointed because I was reading all the various suttas in the Majjhima Nikaya and Digha Nikaya, which have got long stories and fascinating dialogues, and they give a very vivid account of the life of the Buddha as he interacts with his disciples in many ways. So when I asked Lompa Sumedho about what's your favorite sutta, I thought, okay, it's a textbook answer. And I confess that is a short side of myself, basically. Of course, it's been what he has been using for his own practice. And it's not only him that suggests using this for his practice. He was instructed so by the teachers of old and also by his own teachers, Ajahn and the forest teachers in Thailand. And in fact, also the studies about the Buddha's teachings. When Lompa Sumedho was carrying around this little book by Venerable Nyanatiloka, the Word of the Buddha, which is structured around the topics of the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta in many aspects and in many facets. And he really memorized this. So the topic of the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta, what is dukkha and how is dukkha ended, is something that he used from the very beginning of his practice and took it very much to his heart all throughout his practice. And then the revisiting of the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta also is something that personally I feel very enriching, even though we've heard it before and we might say, okay, it's a very fascinating teaching in many ways, and but it doesn't have that colorful elaboration of many of the other suttas, but it teaches us right the heartwood of the Buddha's teachings. So the effort to memorize it is a very good effort. You can take it along and recite it to yourself or to others whenever you're in need, and it leads you through various aspects of the Buddha's teachings. I would say there is like the general part in the beginning where the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta is literally addressing the Buddha's disciples, the first Panchavaggiya, the 5 first disciples that were listening to him. And after thinking, okay, the Buddha has more or less changed his practice and is not strict enough for us anymore, we're the tough practitioners, and the Buddha has reverted to softness and basically has given up his efforts. And the Buddha surprised them by giving this very clear, wisdom-based teaching. And this is the first half, I would say, of the sutta when the Buddha expounds on the 4 Noble Truths. And in the second half, he actually gives an account of his own realization. And he describes, like we just chanted in the English translation and in the Pali, how he gave, how vision, brightness, insight arose in him, all the way to him stating, this is my last knife. There's nothing more for me to do. He also says, before he was able to say that, he underwent a certain process of visiting these teachings, then cultivating them, and then stating to himself, now I have done this. So it's the process plus the beautiful, fascinating account of bringing the process of the realization of the Dhamma to an end, and with the Buddha attaining full Nibbana, full awakening. Awakening meaning then, in this context very clearly, the realization of the Four Noble Truths, the understanding of the arising and ceasing of suffering. And then many times later, he expounded in various ways what this can be meaning. And there's also a gradual path leading towards this development, which the Buddha many times used for people that are caught up, I would say, possibly in worldly situations that don't allow much facing of these difficult teachings. And the Buddha gradually approached the topic in his way of teaching, that he wouldn't just straight away go into the noble truths of suffering and the cessation of suffering, but prepare people and give them a step ladder, a progressive teaching. After his first sermon, he elaborates other aspects of the Dhamma, of his realization, which we'll talk about tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And they are all related to the Four Noble Truths, of course. And it's also part of our exploration to see how these aspects of the Dhamma are intertwined. The Four Noble Truths in the first sermon, then the impermanence of all phenomena in the second sermon, and then the third sermon talks about the qualities of a human being that are, say, we call defiled. The word defiled is a strange word for me. I would say that I've actually never really heard this word before I became a Buddhist, basically. But it means something out of order or dirty or poisoned or say, not clean, impure. So the Buddha then talks about the relationship of the qualities of the heart that is not liberated and how it can be liberated in the third sermon. And so these are main topics in the three sermons. And then the Buddha walked around the Magadhan country and was teaching in various places and met various people. As we know, some of us have gone on pilgrimage in these areas. And he taught about the progressive approach. First, talking about generosity, a sense of support for the needy or support of worthy people, and support of the religious samanas, giving dana, being generous, and being, say, able to support others. Then they talked about sila, in Hindi shila, basically the precepts or the moral conduct. And then he talked about the rewards and of an ethical life, and the rewards, for example, being reborn in a better place, for example, in heaven, which is for many religions the only aim. But then he talks about the drawbacks of sensuality, drawbacks of everything that is pleasant and everything that is pleasing, the desires for comfort, the desires for external happiness, and says then, well, when people see that even the heavenly paradisical paradise situations are still not perfect, then he talks about the bliss of renunciation, letting go, and that paves the way to taking on the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, or goes back to the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta then. Because as I mentioned, like in the beginning, the Buddha found there are not many people around that would straight away be able to face this ultimate truth about, look, there is suffering. No matter what you do, with an unawakened mind, there will always be suffering. There will always be things that take you into trouble, take you into frustration, make you feel uneasy, unpeaceful. And most of the people in the world presently or in former times, we do the opposite. We indulge or we sustain a sense of comfort, and we look for a better solution which makes us feel more comfortable, and which is increasing our pleasure. And we're not really looking at the suffering that arises, or the dukkha that is inherent in all situations, because we can we can swap the scene and go somewhere else. For example, like if it's too hot here, then we go up the mountains to Himachal or maybe to Nepal, and it's nice and cool there, and and then we feel happy again. Then we suddenly start freezing, then we think, okay, let's go somewhere else. Then we're suddenly running around chasing after things that feel good, feel pleasant. And the Buddha says basically there is no end to this. We can keep running around and chasing after things, and populating situation after situation, or birth after birth. In the bigger picture, we crave for better states of being, crave for more pleasant ways of living, more comfortable situations, and then get disappointed and move around again and find another place, find another home. So this is something that I believe also Luang Por Sumedho and many of us have realized to a certain level in our own lives, and all of us sitting here have had this frustration with the worldly happiness or the essential happiness. Like having Coca-Cola is something very pleasant, but it doesn't last long and actually increases your blood sugar, and later you suffer again. Or it costs a lot of money and you have to work a lot, and it's beyond the scope of many people to be able to drink a cold Coca-Cola whenever they want. So just that neediness and that frustration, or if we think in a bigger picture, then the whole frustration inside a society that functions with material comfort, functions with material aims to gratify one's feeling of wanting to have a good time, basically is in the end frustrating. And most of us have had a certain amount of disillusionment with this chase after pleasant things, chase after gratification of our cravings, our desires. And so this is where the Buddha then would start and saying, look, one thing you have to do is look at dukkha. And this is in the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta, where he says, dukkha should be understood. It shouldn't be evaded. It should be made a contemplation. It should be known. It should be seen as for what it is, and be more or less like tolerated, we can say. And this brings us back to then the experiences of our own teachers in the forest tradition. There's a strong emphasis of making life slightly discomfortable, because obviously even in a monastery, one can feel one's got his comfort zones, one's niches, and has realized that, okay, I can get by with a minimum of sweat, with a minimum of shivering, and I've optimized my status now. I can just live here without any big effort. But then the training program comes in and says, look, you need to face the unpleasant things bit by bit. And this is Luang Por Sumedho again. When he went to Wat Pah Pong with Luang Por Chah was pretty much on his case in teasing him and getting him to be frustrated and bringing it to a point. obviously, we don't always need somebody who is like telling us, look here and don't do this, and challenging us. But if we are really faithful, we can also work on these situations by ourselves and find out with our preliminary wisdom what is really happening here. Are we inwardly satisfied? Are we peaceful with this situation, or are we trying to evade it, or are we trying to endure it? And what can we do in order to draw some wisdom from this situation? So this is observation when we chant the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta, the emphasis of knowing and the emphasis of realizing what is happening, the emphasis of seeing dukkha and seeing the conditions. You can say, you can also start on the positive side, like we can also see the emptiness of all the happiness or so, but the emphasis the Buddha gives in the Four Noble Truths is talking directly about the sense of weariness, about the inherent frustration of, okay, you get something that you like and then it's out of date again, then you need to have something new that you like, or you're united with something that you dislike, say you're in a discomfortable situation, you try to evade it and get something more comfortable. That dynamics of constantly swapping and not being able to take things in the way they are is the main reason why we keep going through samsara, going through life after life, never finding peace. So we can say the cessation of dukkha is coming to peace with dukkha, realizing how dukkha is, and then through our practice seeing that actually it is not a stable thing. It's something that arises and ceases. And when we have that quality of seeing what is happening, then we're not caught up with it, then we're not immersed in it, then we're not feeding it. And there's many experiences that we can quote for ourselves already as meditators. Sometimes we are on the right track, we want to be at peace with everything, and then something comes in that disturbs us. Something comes in that makes us restless. Something comes in that's basically an underlying tendency of being critical, being negative, and our peace, our happiness goes out the window, and we're basically experiencing dukkha. And when we see situations like this and watch them carefully and also give them time to make themselves known, not immediately correcting them, not immediately jumping to the other side of wanting to change and go somewhere else or do something better, then we actually got the time to observe what is this thing, dukkha, what is the frustration, what is the suffering here. And this is the miracle, is like when you look at it and see it and admit it and say, okay, this is dukkha, this is what is happening, this is painful, this is frustrating. Then through the faculty of realizing what's going on, one feels empowered, one feels uplifted, one feels emancipated, one feels above dukkha. And this is like the a little taste of the insight that one can have about how the mind plays tricks and how the mind is able to rise above itself and go to a space where we can actually, even unpleasant situations can have no lasting effect on us. They can still be met with peace and happiness. So this is when we practice in the style of the forest tradition. Sometimes we make life a little bit more difficult. Sometimes we're even in unpleasant situations. Sometimes deliberately we actually search for situations that aren't so peaceful. We take on certain practices to challenge us a little bit, and then see, can we watch what's happening? Is there an extra layer, for example, that we add on to it? That's maybe a good way to start. So there's the impact of something that's unpleasant, but do we make a big drama out of it? Do we exaggerate it? Do we make it into a forever thing? If this will last forever, I'm going to die. Just like I remember Ajahn Jayasara one time in my first years when Ajahn Jayasara was the abbot of Wat Vanarachat. He gave a talk where he said, just think of all the situations that you thought, I can't stand this anymore. And what happened? You could stand it. You're still around. You're still alive. So, of course, like we don't provoke things that are dangerous, and we don't go to the extreme of finding things that are really, really existentially threatening. But we find the right balance. We use just the amount of dukkha, and we choose that to teach ourselves and choose that to observe what we're doing with it and how we react to it. That is just about bearable, just about the right amount, the right thing that we can take. And then we see, oh, what am I making out of it? And is it something I can put aside, or is it something I get activated on? I get agitated, I get angry, I get resentful. And sometimes after having meditated for a while, we actually do realize there's many themes that we are already able to simply take, for example, physical discomfort to a certain level, or just the idea of noise, for example, or things that are not quite right in terms of the setting, because when in our practice we don't just run away, but we keep to a certain rhythm in according to the time frame, and we say we see this through. We're not going to run away and get up and do something else. We see this through, and we stay with whatever dukkha arises in that situation. And we can see that we have already learned a lot about how to deal with these unpleasant situations, how to deal with frustration. And obviously there's sometimes the wish to do something really, really breathtakingly difficult. Many of us think we should be the hero that crushes dukkha with one effort and be there and really give ourselves a hard time. And then the harder we go, the bigger the perspectives for real liberation are. And I would say, let's be careful, because we might be deluding ourselves, because there's this dynamic of wanting to give yourself a hard time is also not what the Buddha suggested in the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta. It's just about the right balance between something that is difficult and something that's too pleasant. And to find that is not so easy, and it takes already a lot of skills. But when we look at friends and relatives that don't give a hoot about sitting in meditation and don't give a hoot about looking at the Dhamma and looking at dukkha, we can sometimes see how easily they get agitated about things and how easily they increase dukkha just because of their own reactions to dukkha. And we can already see that, or imagine ourselves in their situation, that we may be able to calm down a little bit and not get so upset and not get so threatened by dukkha. And I remember also one of my, say, questions towards Luang Por Sumedho in my Navaka years, when Luang Por Sumedho was visiting Thailand, and I was very idealistic about my practice, thinking the Thai forest tradition is one of the toughest traditions. And Luang Por Man, he was really resolute. He lived in these very austere situations and put his life on the line and did lots of meditation, not distracted by anything, no sense of impingement by modern world, and just basically practicing directly with the challenges of life, challenges of fear of death, fear of like threats from nature, for example. And I was impressed with the idea of like taking the Dhutanga practices one step further. And the Dhutanga practices being the allowable ascetic practices, which we practice in Wat Bananachat, Wat Nong Papong, already, for example, living in the forest or living in a cremation site, or using only the minimum amount of robes, or having only one meal a day and things like that, we already make life quite difficult. And every now and again, we practice to sit up all night without lying down to sleep. And I was thinking, because of the example of many of the great teachers in this day and age that really gave themselves an extra push to endure dukkha, I was thinking I probably need to sit with this determination for a long time, and go through a phase of really thinking I'm going to die while I'm sitting. And we call it practicing to contemplate dukkha vedana, because if you keep sitting, the body aches more and more, and then there may be a point where you feel, no, I'm dying. I'm really at the end. I can't stand this anymore. And I asked Luang Por Sumedho whether he had himself actually done this practice, because there's quite a few other monks in our Sangha that have sat through many hours without moving and enduring this utter torture. And one of them is a monk that later disrobed, actually. And he even wrote a little book about practicing with dukkha vedana. And I was reading this. It's published in Thai, and I was very impressed. And he was giving me this, Ajahn giving me the advice: you gradually build it up, sit longer and longer. So then we had Luang Por Sumedho visiting Wat Bananachat, and I asked him about, should I basically say train myself to face death while sitting in this way of making dukkha vedana arise through long sits. And have you ever done this, Luang Por? And Luang Por Sumedho said, I don't think I need to do this, because all my life I have been contemplating dukkha in all aspects, in every situation. I'm very well aware of the dynamics of dukkha. I don't think I have to put myself into this situation. I'm very confident at the end of my life, when I need to die, I'll be able to do the same contemplations about dukkha, because I've built up the insight into what dukkha is bit by bit. That was a relief for me. I thought, okay, let's not go for the super tough practices, but take Luang Por Sumedho's middle way. you go through the various situations, but you need to be honest about them. You need to see them as to what they are. And you cannot just evade them, but you accept them, and you welcome even the frustrations, even the little dukkha. And it felt like a real confirmation that he said, actually, Kevali, you don't have to sit all night. I'm sure if you do this practice consistently, you'll be able to face old age, sickness, death appropriately. So this is one of the aspects that the Buddha also comments in the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta, is like, what is dukkha is also old age, sickness, death. And it takes a lot of inclining one's mind towards these topics to really see them and be able to take them as a challenge for one's comfort, to be able to see them in the light of death, in the light of, if I still attach to things, if I still crave for things, I'll have to be reborn again. I'd have to do this whole thing again. I'd have to go to school again. I'd have to be passing exams again. And just to make that a reality, that this is actually a very daunting perspective. And the dreads of samsara, the dukkha inherent in being born again and again, this is also one aspect of dukkha. And we're all in the same boat with that. And we all need to take this serious, in that sense that we don't get stressed and depressive about it, but that we feel we are developing an angle towards these very big questions of our life that we can rely on when we face them. And I believe it can be done gradually. It can be done in a way of using wisdom, using the capacity to raise your awareness above the situation and see it with, say, maybe from a bird's eye perspective, and feel not identified with this is me suffering, this am I, like we'll see in the next sutta we talk about, but be able to see it as a process and be able to take the impact of it without getting agitated in our minds. So these are training ways, and the forest tradition, there's various grades as well. All of us know very well that Luang Pu Man has passed away a long time already, 1949, I believe. That's how many years? Almost 80 years. And the days have changed. Like there's a lot of more different ways that cause suffering to people these days than that caused suffering 80 years ago. When we think about the dangers of being alone in the forest, of course, like I also as a child was afraid of the darkness, but things like tigers and elephants don't really cross our paths too much. And our whole lifestyle has been lifted to a level of certain comforts being very normal for us. And our baseline of dukkha, maybe if we had an absolute measure, we can say it has decreased. And it's been lifted to a level of like sustainable comfort for most of us, I would say, unless we're living in a war zone, unless we're living in poverty, unless we're living in a very difficult physical health situation. As long as we're healthy and are here, for example, in such a good setting, then we can say we're lucky that we have not much existential dukkha, not much life-threatening experiences. But still, if we think about it, there's so many other things that on our level of daily life, we still have a lot of things that we develop unnecessary dukkha, and that we still subjectively see the dukkha that arises for us similarly to maybe an old Ajahn living in the forests or living in the cremation sites and being exposed to threatening animals and threatening situations. We can apply our wisdom a little bit more to our situation and see what is causing us dukkha and what do we need to do to understand what's happening. Many times simply be able to watch it in the first place, or to hold our reaction back and be able to see what it is. And then we also realize that the relativity of dukkha, we can see that actually as a real good lesson. Sometimes small things can make us really suffer a lot. Also psychologically, some reactions that we have from our mindset that make us feel agitated, angry, averse to, or on the positive spectrum, get addicted, get craving to a massive amount that we aren't even aware of. We can also see that very easily. And this is all captured under the heading of the dukkha should be completely understood, or should be studied, or should be, say, realized. And then we know that the Buddha taught about what is actually feeding dukkha is the craving, the desires to be, to have, to want to, and the desires not to be, not to have, not to want to, and also the simple cravings for pleasant feelings as they arise, so sensuality, for example, watching music, watching movies, listening to music, singing, dancing, and so forth. And all of us living in a monastery or coming to monasteries regularly see the advantage of stepping away from this sensual realm that's always enticing and always suggesting more entertainment. And then we step back and come back to basic factors of life, sitting there and enduring the physical hardships of sitting on a floor for 45 minutes or 1 hour or 2 hours, maybe not 10 hours, maybe, but like 2 hours, 3 hours. Like we can see, oh, what does that do to my mind? What am I planning? What am I wishing? What am I wanting? Where's my craving taking me? We can perfectly sit still physically, and our mind takes us all over the place, takes us all over the world, takes us to the next situation that we enjoy. And so we're constantly working at our non-peace. And so we can learn to slow down and accept the situation as for what it is, and learn to let go of the craving to be, craving not to be, and the craving for sensuality. And then the Buddha says, okay, there is the cessation of dukkha. Through the cessation of craving, we have cessation of dukkha. And these are some insights that many of us have in small little portions as well. Say, thinking about situations that we were caught up with, that we were agitated about, that we were not letting go, willing to even have revenge and righteous indignation about, and thinking this shouldn't be, should never have happened, and how can this happen? And then after some time, if we're not doing anything physically and verbally that's silly, but we're living with that reaction and we realize what's going on, we can see how this ceases, how this gradually doesn't have the impact anymore. You can only be angry so long. It's one of my favorite quotes of Luang Por Chah when he was asked about how to deal with anger. He just said, okay, be angry as long as you can. Maybe 3 hours, 4 hours, 3 days, 4 days, just be angry. Just sit there, be fully angry. And sure enough, the person who was sitting there trying to be 100% angry for the maximum amount of time had to give up. The anger wasn't there anymore. It's just kind of, it's defeated by the recognition this is happening. It's defeated by the by the law of impermanence, even unwholesome feelings. If you sleep over it, for example, they might be only half of the unwholesome feelings, and you just give yourself a time frame where you're not reacting to them, and step back from them and look at what's happening, and then sure enough, it's like the air is out and the balloon is basically kind of like out of air, deflated. So there's various insights I believe we have on a small normal scale where we can see actually also dukkha ceases. This is one of the beautiful confirmations that the Buddha gives at the end of the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta. He says, Yang kinchi samudaya dhammang sapantang nirodha dhammante. Whatever condition that is created by causes and conditions, whatever dhamma, whatever state that has been created by causes and conditions, at the end, the very end, sapantang, in the very end, it will cease. And I always put for myself in brackets, even dukkha. Whatever has a reason, even if dukkha has a reason, at the very end, it will cease. You just need to endure it and not be silly and make much of a fuss about it and react to it. So the Buddha also included then the path of practice, which he calls the middle way, because there were so many practices that were going into the direction of really giving oneself a hard time. Like I exemplified the all-night sittings, which is of course for some people the right measure, maybe not for me and maybe not for you, but for some people it may be the right thing to do. And the Buddha didn't forbid it, but the Buddha also didn't include it in his advice into his ascetic practices. But there are certain practices that the Buddha said are going too far, like giving oneself a hard time to inflicting pain on oneself in order to study it, for example. Please, let's not go there. The Buddha said the middle way, just take it as it comes, take it as it arises. Don't add anything to it. You don't have to increase the dukkha. The dukkha is there and we can see it, we can study it. And with our refined mindfulness and with our refined awareness about the processes, we can see how it actually gains momentum. And we don't need to induce it in that sense. He said, okay, live simply, live in a way frugal, live life of renunciation, for example, seeing the fleeting sensuality of like parties or holidays or adventure tours, or maybe internet happiness as nothing permanent, and go back to the basics and live a simple life. But he said, don't overdo it in that sense, that taking on all the hardships that he himself had gone through, sitting on in very painful postures, or fasting till he was almost dead, basically. It's also noticeable that fasting is not one of the allowable ascetic practices, and the Bodhisattva had experiences that it didn't help him. So he said, don't overdo it to that level. Don't make it existentially threatening for yourself. Just use the right level. And then he outlines that the Noble Eightfold Path, these are 8 factors that you can actually cultivate. It's a positive approach. You can cultivate it. You should bhavana. You should make it develop these qualities, which is the right view, the understanding of the teachings of the Dhamma, understanding of the 3 fundamental characteristics of life, anicca, dukkha, anatta, and developing a sense of giving priority to the 4 Noble Truths as a view on life. If you fully realize the 4 Noble Truths already, then you're finished with the practice. So samadhi is like the dawn of the realization. It shows you the path. It shows you the outline of what to do with the 4 Noble Truths, with dukkha, and with the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta. So samadhi is the right view. We start with that, like it's one of the factors of a well-balanced practice. Samma sankappo, to have the right intention or the right disposition, right attitude. For example, abandoning cruelty, and developing fearlessness, and then also developing a sense of renunciation, that inclination towards, okay, I can let go of things. Okay, I don't need everything. Okay, I can be frugal. Okay, I can live, for example, nekkhamma, live by the 8 precepts. I don't have to have, say, sexual stimulants all the time, or I can have pauses where I'm just basically with the basic necessities. I can renounce luxury and so forth. So that's nekkhamma sankappo, to be able to renounce things. And then the next part of the Noble Eightfold Path are the factors around sila. It starts with speech and then action. And we know the 5 precepts, 8 precepts, or the bhikkhu sila, or bhikkhuni sila, very elaborate, but it gives you a moral compass of where to go, which is accepted and leads to a feeling of freedom from remorse, and the feeling of peace in mind, and feeling of wholesome actions increasing. And the right livelihood, ultimately the Buddha says livelihood is to go on alms round. So you don't have to earn your wages, but your full-time practitioners and other people support you. That's also an aspect of right livelihood. But for the lay people in the lay world, in family world, right livelihood is to not engage in these incorrect livelihoods, like, for example, selling weapons, drugs, slaves, human trafficking would be the modern word, and also, yeah, not killing, not slaughtering animals for livelihood. So the Buddha singled out a few professions that are too aggressive or too strong to be able to serve for an even practice. And he said that is wrong livelihood. And ultimately, like, we can include or practically we can include anything that is a wholesome way of earning your living. For example, if we do something that is useful in society, for example, teaching or nursing or bringing up children, or being in an organization that does useful projects to make the world more livable, for example. These are all probably a modern way of like including right livelihood in that sense, that we're doing something that is useful, but it's not done for the sense of self or sense of the elevation of oneself over others. So to have an harmonious livelihood, not a disharmonious, aggressive one. So then we know the wholesome efforts to increase wholesomeness and abandon unwholesomeness. This is a very, very dear part for any practitioner, that we keep watching our mind, thinking, are we actually increasing dukkha by unwholesome mind states, or are we letting go of dukkha by developing wholesome mind states, for example, loving kindness, a supportive mind of appreciative joy, and wholesome dhammas, doing wholesome actions, and then feeling the goodness of one's actions. This is a wholesome, a kusala dhamma. And then we cultivate these, like do good things basically, and abandon bad things. That's part of the meditator's tasks, and it's part of any Buddhist task, to cultivate the good and abandon the not so good, the bad, the evil. I don't think anybody really perceives himself as evil, so we say cultivate even the not so good. If it's not so good, we also abandon it. Not only if it's really evil. I don't believe we're all anywhere there. So then, of course, we have the seventh factor of a balanced path to practice through the realization of the Four Noble Truths, is the factor of right mindfulness. And all of us are Vipassana practitioners, most of us, and we know very well about the mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind states or the agitations in the mind, and mindfulness of the Dhamma, the teachings, and recollecting and bringing them to life in our practice with a sense of alertness and a sense of constant effort in whatever posture we are, whatever we do, that we have that application of the mind, and sati, being based in that. That's the seventh path of the balanced approach to realizing the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha suggests in the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta. And the eighth path, I just read a very nice little translation saying it's the factor of stillness. We know the deeper meditation states where we can let go of the hindrances and being in a state of like utter peace, where there is a break from engagement with the senses, break of engagement with even the mind states of getting carried away with sensuality or getting carried away with unwholesome states of mind. We basically practice to be very serene, still, and it's a practice of samadhi, practicing the old tradition that the Bodhisattva already practiced before he realized the Four Noble Truths. Is the practice of meditation in the deep jhana states. So that's like the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Buddha says, let's cultivate this. This is the thing we should cultivate. And they're very practical things. So the Four Noble Truths aren't only concepts. They're not only, say, commandments where we have to think, now we have to feel dukkha, we have to face dukkha, we have to challenge ourselves with dukkha. But there's all this very, very broad spectrum of practices from the Noble Eightfold Path that we should cultivate all together. And then with the effects of this practice, be able to realize as it arises, what is dukkha, what is causing dukkha, and how can it cease? And how do I do this? How do I cultivate this, facing and abandoning of dukkha? So the Buddha gave these instructions in the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta, and in the second part he talks about them leading himself to completion after having completely understood dukkha, having then abandoned the causes of dukkha, and then having realized the freedom of dukkha. Then he came to having realized the path to dukkha, and then he says, then there was no more work for me to do. I've done what I have done. I have, this is my last birth. So the Buddha in the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta says goodbye to rebirth, which is a wonderful thing and makes our hair stand on end. So I offer that for reflection. I hope there were some thoughts for all of us to cultivate the message of the DhammacakkappavattanaSutta in a direct way for our own practice and our own level of mindfulness and wisdom. Offer that for reflection tonight. Also say goodbye to the Zoom followers. Didn't have the projector, so I can only see roughly that there's some icons on the screen in the far distance. Good night. Shubharatri.
Thank you, Bhante. And I think we can at least do the pranama if Bhante cannot listen. First pranam. Dutiya pranam.
Arahang sama sambuddho bhagava buddham bhagavantang abhivademi swakhato bhagavata dhammo dhammang namasami Supatipanno bhagavato sāvaka saṅgho saṅghang namami.
Thank you, everyone. I think tomorrow evening again for next sutta we can meet, and morning session will go on slowly. Thank you so much.